Founded, flourished and eventually forgotten, this has been the fate of many cities since ancient times. A few names have stayed alive in legend and literature while others disappeared completely until a chance discovery brought these mysterious metropolises back from the dead. From Sigiriya, the amazing hilltop site in Sri Lanka, to the astonishing Pompeii in Italy, we look at some of the most fabulous cities lost and reborn. The world's amazing lost cities recently rediscovered. Sigiriya, Sri Lanka. The jungle in central Sri Lanka is thick and lush. Back in 1831, Major Jonathan Forbes of the 78th Highlanders of the British Army was having trouble hacking his way through on horseback. But as he emerged, he came across an astonishing sight. It was the bush-covered summit of Sigiriya, adorned with brightly colored frescoes that looked as if they had just been painted. Forbes had rediscovered a mythical city that had lain abandoned since the 14th century. Sigiriya means lion, and the city is fronted by a huge lion entrance sadly missing its head. Sigiriya was constructed on a rocky outcrop 650 feet, 200 meters, above the jungle, initially as a 3rd century BC Buddhist monastery. Then 800 years later, King Kasyapa built an opulent palace there and covered it in frescoes. The palace was surrounded by gardens, pools and a mirrored wall that was polished so brightly the king could see his face in it. It takes around an hour to climb the 1,200 steps to the top of the rock, but the trek rewards with the sight of the Sky Palace surrounded by amazing gardens, pools and moats plus colorful frescoes. Called by some the 8th wonder of the world, UNESCO recognized Sigiriya as a World Heritage Site in 1982. Sanchi, India. In 1818, Major Henry Taylor and his men were out hunting in a location that was a 2 days' march northeast of Bhopal in central India. They stumbled upon a huge domed stone structure with several stone gateways. Each was 40 feet, 12 m, high and 9 feet, 2.7 meters, wide and decorated with carvings of elephants, horses, lions and maidens. Taylor had discovered a 3rd century BC Buddhist complex built by the Emperor Ashoka. At the time, Buddhism was relatively unknown, but Ashoka was drawn to its message of peace. He built a great stupa or domed temple guarded by 4 gateways carved with scenes from Buddhism. However, by the 13th century AD, the center was abandoned. Sanchi can be reached by bus or car from Bhopal Airport. The preservation of the site is astonishing and visitors can take in the Great Stupa, one of 3 such structures, plus 50 other monuments and a monastery. In 1989, Sanchi was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Pompeii, Italy. In 1748, the Duke of Naples was having a summer palace built 14 miles, 24 kilometers, south of Naples on Italy's west coast. As workmen dug foundations, they came across the buildings and streets of a lost city, and treasure hunters and art collectors descended on the scene. It dawned on people that this was the lost and largely forgotten Roman city of Pompeii, destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius one day in the summer of AD 79. Throughout Victorian times, when this picture was taken, people flocked to see the mysterious town as more was uncovered. They found a huge amphitheater, a forum and fine villas, as well as ordinary houses, streets, shops and brothels. On the day of the eruption, thousands of people were trapped and died of gas poisoning. Their bodies left cavities in the ash, and when plaster of Paris was poured in, their sad remains became evident. Today Pompeii is one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world, with over 2 million annual visitors. It's astonishing to see this world trapped in time, with the colors of the wall paintings as fresh as if they had just been done. And the excavations still continue, with much of the city yet to be uncovered and surprising secrets still being unraveled. This city became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1997. Carroll, Peru. American history professor Paul Cusack was fascinated by ancient settlements, and he devoted much of his time to making studies in Peru. While he was there in 1948, he made a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Hard at work in a dry desert terrace 125 miles, 200 kilometers, north of Lima, he came across the remains of an ancient city. Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady radiocarbon dated the site to 5,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest cities in the Americas. It once housed 3,000 pre-Inca inhabitants and was already thriving when the Egyptian pyramids were just being built. Covering 370 acres, there were temples, plazas, an amphitheater and ordinary houses. Cairo was peaceful with no trace of battlements or weapons too. Abandoned in 2000 BC, it was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2009. Tannis, Egypt. If you've ever seen the Indiana Jones movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, you'll be familiar with the fictional version of Tannis. But the real-life story behind the city is just as amazing as the one from the film. In 1939, Pierre Montet's team was excavating around 100 miles, 160 kilometers, northeast of Cairo, looking for the city called Zone, which in the Bible was where baby Moses was found. Montet uncovered burial chambers, huge temples and an urban complex. Tannis was a magnificent city and one-time capital of ancient Egypt. The earliest buildings date from around 1000 BC with the Temple of Amun, king of the gods, surrounded by a wall, plus houses and streets on a grid pattern. It declined when its ports silted up and the entire city slipped beneath the sand. Visitors can get there by taking a train to Port Said and a bus to Tannis. Qalaghadarband, Iraqi Kurdistan. Thanks to declassified spy footage and cutting-edge drone photography, a lost city was unearthed just a few years ago in Iraqi Kurdistan. Built around 331 BC, Qalaghadarband is thought to have been established by Alexander the Great. It's believed the fortified city sits on what was once a well-trodden route between Iran and Iraq. The site was originally detected when experts watched spy footage from the Cold War that was made public in 1996. But the area's political volatility meant nothing could be done at first. But in 2017, a team of Iraqi and British archaeologists, led by specialists from the British Museum, began excavating the area. Together, they uncovered terracotta roof tiles and Greek and Roman statues, including one that depicts Aphrodite. Mohenjo-Daro, Pakistan. In 1922, R.D. Banerjee, an official with the Archaeological Survey of India, was investigating what he thought was a Buddhist monument in the Sindh province of what's now Pakistan. He guessed the site dated to around 500 BC, but when he made some trial trenches, he realized it was far older. His boss, John Marshall, made further excavations in the 1920s and 1930s and deduced the city actually dated from around 2500 BC. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest settlements of the ancient Indus Valley and home to 50,000 people. Buildings uncovered include a great bath, an elaborate sewage system with 700 freshwater wells and a grid system of housing. Its residents were a prosperous community, as artifacts made of ivory and gold have been found. They are believed to have been traders with standardized seals and weights. The city went into decline around 1900 BC and was abandoned. Although it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980, sadly the mud brick buildings remain at risk of damage from the salty waters of the nearby Indus River. Xanadu, China. When British diplomat Stephen Bushell trekked into the prairie land of Inner Mongolia in 1872 in search of Xanadu, he wasn't the only one whose imagination had been captured by the lost 13th century city. 75 years earlier, the English writer Coleridge had penned a poem based on a historical description of the fabled metropolis. But it was Bushell who, about 220 miles, 350 kilometers, north of Beijing, made the rediscovery. Its walls featured ruined palaces strewn with blocks of marble and stone lions and dragons. The city gate was intact under a 20-foot, 6 meters, arch. Bushell was the first European to set eyes on the place since the merchant and explorer Marco Polo visited in 1275. The Venetian adventurer wrote that the site was chosen by the emperor as his summer residence and featured marble and gilt halls and chambers. He claimed wild animals roamed in the grounds and pastures, and there was even a bamboo palace that could be taken down and put up elsewhere. By 1430, Xanadu had been abandoned. Much of what Bushell saw has now gone, but the authorities have preserved what remains and excavated more than 1,000 buildings. The 25,000-hectare site was opened to visitors in 2011. Around 60,000 objects have been found, including ceramics, jade sculptures and coins, and they are on display in a museum 4 miles, 7 kilometers, south of the site. In 2012, Xanadu was recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. Troy, Turkey. When German businessman and adventurer Heinrich Schliemann started an archaeological dig on Turkey's Aegean coast in 1868, He was convinced he'd found Troy, the city made famous by Homer's epic poem The Iliad. While Schliemann certainly had found a magnificent ancient city, in truth there's no ironclad proof the ruins really are the Troy featured in the ancient story, or indeed that a Trojan War ever took place. Nowadays the city is known as Hisarlik. Legend says that Troy, also known as Ilium, was placed under a 10-year siege by the Greeks after Paris of Troy abducted Helen, Queen of Sparta. This is thought to have taken place around 1200 BC. But the site Schliemann discovered had been occupied from around 4000 BC for about 3000 years, with the buildings and walls of 7 settlements discovered. Troy was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1998. Machu Picchu, Peru. In July 1911, American historian Hiram Bingham was making a tour of ancient Inca settlements in Peru. He was near the city of Cusco when a farmer told him about ruins on top of a mountain which his people called Machu Picchu or Old Peak. Bingham and his team rode on mules to see it for themselves and were amazed to discover stone entrances to a forgotten city built on a number of man-made terraces. It's believed the city was built around AD 1450 as a summer retreat for Inca rulers and luckily remained hidden from the Spanish conquistadors. The 200 buildings had a population of about 750 people, probably royal retainers. Built without the use of mortar, the polished dry stone buildings include the Intihuatana, a kind of sundial, the semicircular Temple of the Sun and the Temple of Three Windows. The site was abandoned in 1550, perhaps due to disease brought by the Spanish invaders. Today, you can reach Machu Picchu by train from Cusco, then take a bus to the entrance. It can also be accessed on foot from the town of Aguas Calientes, but it's a strenuous 90-minute climb. Note that there's a cap on daily visitor numbers, around 4,500, though sometimes more, so it's best to book online in advance for a time slot. Excavations continue, and as pathways run off into the jungle, there may yet be more discoveries. The city became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. Scara Bray, Orne, Scotland, UK. In the winter of 1850, a huge storm hit Scotland causing around 200 deaths. The next day, in the Orkney Isles, villagers discovered the tempest had dislodged part of a cliff and uncovered a hidden settlement with stone roofless houses. The local laird, or estate owner, William Watt, excavated 4 of the houses. When the village was threatened again by storm the following century, it was decided the site needed preserving. Tests showed the site dated from 3200 to 2200 BC and was inhabited for 600 years. It consisted of 10 round stone houses with a central hearth and beds by the wall. The roofs were probably made of whalebone and peat, and roofed passages meant you could go from house to house out of the weather. The standardized design suggests there was no hierarchy, but a community of sophisticated people living peacefully as farmers, herdsmen and traders. The village is on the Bay of Scale, the largest of Scotland's Orkney Isles, and the ferry takes you there from John O'Groats. The site is quite small, but the houses are remarkably well preserved by centuries of sand and soil. However, they are still delicate and can be viewed from the pathway, while a replica house offers a fuller picture of Neolithic life on the island. Scara Bray became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1999. The Lost City, Colombia. For more than 300 years, Colombia's Ciudad Perdida, Lost City, remained hidden from the outside world, known only by those living deep in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta Mountains. Then, in 1972, a group of bird hunters happened upon an ancient stone staircase, carpeted with moss. When they hacked their way through, they found the ruins of a vast city buried under thick foliage. Built around AD 800, the Lost City, or Tiuna, as it was known, was home to several thousand Tairona people. But it was abandoned after the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the late 16th century and gradually reclaimed by the fast-growing jungle. Today, nearly an acre of the Lost City is open to tourists, although a far bigger area remains hidden by thick foliage. The only way to get there is via a strenuous, 5-day hike, culminating in a thigh-burning climb up some 1,200 steps. But the effort is rewarded, as this sacred jungle spot features magnificent tiered terraces, ancient stone paths and incredible views. Vianagara, India. In 1799, Scottish Army officer Colin Mackenzie was in the Deccan Plateau area of southern India when he came upon ancient ruins. He'd heard rumors about the lost city of Vian, Yanara, but he was unsure about what he'd discovered. He didn't realize he was looking at the remains of a great empire that dated from the 14th century AD. The Vian Yanara Empire was famed for its efficiency, international links and magnificent architecture. The temples and intricate carvings they produced are unbelievable: huge stone wagons, 8 foot, 2.4 meters, high stone horses and a row of 11 domed elephant stables. It was a wealthy community too, with one visitor at the time remarking that people in the market traded diamonds and sapphires as easily as if they were vegetables. In 1565, a war ruined the city and it was abandoned. Nowadays, the wonderfully restored monuments are part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Hampi, which lies in Vijayanagara in central Karnataka state. Highlights include the huge steps to the audience hall and the underground green soapstone passages to the elephant stables. Aden, Egypt. In September 2020, archaeologist Dr. Zahi Hawass and his team began searching for a temple near the city of Luxor, on the west bank of the Nile. They got a little more than they bargained for. On the 8th of April 2021, they announced the discovery of an entire 3,000-year-old city which had been buried under sand for thousands of years. Aden, also known as the Lost Golden City, is thought to be the largest ancient city ever uncovered in Egypt. The significance of the find was compared to the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Thanks to mud bricks bearing the seals of King Amenhotep III's cartouche, Aden has been dated to between 1391 and 1353 BC, one of the most affluent periods in Egyptian history. According to the archaeologists who found it, the former town is remarkably well preserved, with rooms filled with objects including clay pots, tools for spinning and weaving, rings and scarabs. There's also evidence of working life here, from a bakery, complete with ovens, to a workshop, containing mud bricks for building temples and tombs, as well as casting molds used to create amulets. But one of the most mysterious discoveries at Aden was a human skeleton, found with arms outstretched to his side, and remains of a rope wrapped around his knees, according to the team's statement.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.